Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from IBM, General Manager of Development and Manufacturing, Systems and Technology Group, Arvind Krishna.
Good evening, everyone. So, it's always a tough act to follow. Not quite a teenager, but you go from 20 years to 102. So, Jim talked a lot about innovation, about openness, and I think you'll hear quite a bit of the same from us, as well as some of IBM's observations on the paradigm shift that's happening in the world and how actually open and the innovation that results from open helps all of us deal with that paradigm shift. So if you look at the world is changing in terms of the data that's generated, in terms of the intensity of workloads that are happening, the number of connected devices that are out there. 22 billion and counting, so that's about 4, 5 for every human that's out there. We got 35 zettabytes of data that we expect by the end of the decade, 8 zettabytes by the middle of the decade. That's 21 zeros for those who don't follow zettabytes, 6 more zeros after petabytes. And we got to go deal with all of that data. We want to derive insight from it. We want our enterprises and governments to profit from it. We want to drive innovation from it. Along with that, what innovation has brought today is the ability to treat hardware like software. And when you look at me, no, I'm not quite crazy yet. What I mean by that is the ability to take the entire infrastructure, make it more programmable, make it more nimble, make it more flexible, make it more responsive, stand things up in a few seconds as opposed to a few weeks. What we're calling software-defined environments is an answer to that approach. And lastly, and this really reiterates a lot of what Jim talked about, how can we be open and collaborative to harness the innovation, the energy of not any one enterprise's thousands of people, but the millions of citizens on the planet who want to help make all of this happen. And our term for it is smarter computing. The question is, how do we harness all of the energy, the innovation, towards the goal of smarter computing? We really do believe in open. How do you leverage open standards so that they're not a lock into any one enterprise? How do you leverage open source? And how do you leverage an open architecture? What it enables is speed, is integration, is choice. Open source standards really do engage the ecosystem so that you do not get locked into any one enterprise, but get the flexibility to achieve your business goals, and you go with those who can help you achieve those goals and whose engineering is best suited against the technologies that you are deploying in the enterprise. An example of that, if you look at Red Hat and IBM, our collaboration goes back 14 years ago to 1999. Began with Linux, but didn't stop with Linux. Virtualization, KVM, Open Virtualization Alliance, OpenStack, Open Daylight, building upon each other, and if you notice, more and more happening lately than before. So maybe you do teach. Our previous 2 CEOs ago wrote a book teaching elephants how to dance. So maybe this 102-year-old entity does learn how to sort of participate in this open and collaborative world. And we contribute quite a bit back to it, as I'll describe in a few minutes. Announcing recently, last month, in China, we announced a new IBM Systems Linux Center in Beijing, together with Red Hat. And if you look there, the goal is to go out and establish that even in an emerging market such as China, Power and Linux have a role to play, driven by the 1600 ISVs, the 2500 open source projects, all of which run on Power Linux. Great example from Silk Road Telecom. My guess is few in the audience know that name or have heard of that name. So let's just put it in context. A small telecom by China standards with 30 million customers. 30 million customers would make it about a third the size of the entire United States, but it's small certainly by Chinese standards. Over 1 million commercial customers, and they needed to stand up a cloud for deployment of all of their applications as they are foraging down the road of providing connectivity to their customers. They need to do it with power efficiency, they need to do it with data center consolidation, all the problems that many of you face every day. Great example of the innovation that IBM and Red Hat do together. You go on from there and you begin to talk about doing that not just in China, but in New York and in Texas, in Austin. We're bringing the capability to show people what's going on, in this case with Linux and with Power. We show them hands-on help to do porting, run classes, run briefings. All of that can be done in person with all of the correct expertise. A scorecard from last year. Colleague and friend of mine, Robert LeBlanc, stood up here last year and talked about KVM, talked about OpenStack, and talked about Hadoop and big data. I'll tell you what we're doing on all three. You see the growth in KVM, you see the endorsement of KVM, and more on that to come in the next few minutes. OpenStack, announcements last year, announcements this year. OpenStack and KVM, by the way, go together extremely well. 95% of OpenStack deployments are on KVM. Thousands more developers. People say 3,000, but when I counted and I looked at the website for the user conference in Beaverton a couple of months ago, over 6,000 people had registered. So that tells me over 6,000 developers are wanting to get onto it. You look at Hadoop, whether it's 60% growth or 100% growth, some people are counting 2 million servers. 2 million servers stood up running Hadoop in the year 2012. All of these are pointing to the growth that is going on these initiatives. And we'll talk more about them, give a little bit more color on it. If you look at KVM, you all will agree, virtualized servers exceed non-virtualized servers that are shipping out there. 100,000 plus servers, not cores, servers deploy KVM. 95% of OpenStack, as I already mentioned. Centers of excellence stood up by us in both Beijing and in Wall Street. And you look at virtualization and you say, this is a way to go begin to harness how we get the flexibility, the speed, the agility. Jim talked a lot about cloud and how cloud is becoming the default form of deployment for many enterprises, and virtualization sits under all of that. You then go on and you think about endorsement of OpenStack, right? I committed a scorecard, so KVM has grown. As late as March of this year, we talked about how OpenStack itself is growing, how it has the largest active community in the industry. We have over 250 developers from IBM who contribute to OpenStack, which is a sign of our investment. By the way, OpenStack is, by definition, open. It is an open source project, and all of those are available to all of you. How to go ahead and leverage virtualized storage, virtualized network, as well as virtualized compute. So it's not just the server that is virtualized anymore. It gives you a way to then go ahead and play with and make, in some sense, make you agnostic to the specific virtualization technology. Jim referenced that being open is better than being closed or proprietary. We all know that company out there, well, is it West Coast or East Coast? It's tough to tell with the parentship of the V company. Are they closed or are they open? I mean, I'd assert that they are closed. If you're not putting the stuff out there in open source, you're closed. I would assert that OpenStack is a much better answer for how you want to create a cloud, deploy a cloud, manage a cloud, than the closed answer. You go on from there and you think about examples. So this is IBM and Red Hat working together in France. You take ZTalk. ZTalk is an MSP and needed to stand up a managed storage as well as a server cloud. And they chose the combination of IBM together with our Pure Flex offerings, together with Red Hat, to stand up that cloud in an extremely dense computing environment so that they could reduce their data center space and hence cost, as well as pack a lot more virtual images onto a given footprint. A win-win for them, and certainly a great example for all of us in how we're working together. We talked about big data. Jim referred and began with the theme is connect. The world is connected. So I'll take myself. I drove up this morning from New York to Boston. I was going to fly originally, but the weather didn't quite cooperate, and it's a close enough drive. So let's see. What's the digital breadcrumbs that I left on the way? I bought gas before I left, and you swiped my credit card. I got in my car, and certainly my cell phone probably registered itself across 100 different base stations. I went through 1, 2, 3, 4 toll booths. Every one of them, EasyPass probably connected with some back-end system to go connect and see what's happening. I certainly passed some photo radar because I did count 4 different cops along the way. Now, the good news is no tickets, and I made good time, so that's all there. You come into Boston and you begin to see these cameras on the side of the road taking images. Every one of the toll booths, by the way, takes a nice picture of your license plate in case you didn't notice, because they might need to ticket you if it didn't quite go through. You look at all of that and you say, my God, I generated a few megabytes of digital breadcrumbs today. A few thousand of you, so in aggregate we generated a few megabytes, a few gigabytes of digital breadcrumbs about all of us. So you go global and you go from there and you say, so that's a few terabytes across all of us. So the goal of big data is, can we harvest all of this, not just from humans, by the way, but from all of the harvesters, the combines, the machines, the 90 processors in any given automobile, airplanes, all of that, to begin to create more insight right at the point of delivery of action so that the world becomes more convenient. We all begin to get the benefits of all of that big data. And you'll say, well, how's it connected to open? How's it connected to Linux? A lot of these technologies, by the way, run on Linux and on Linux only. A lot of these technologies are innovated upon by the wide ecosystem. And that's really the benefit that we want to bring. Competing in this world, if you go back to what the economists said, you go back to an MIT Sloan study, you go back to a study at the University of Cambridge, you go back to studies done by all of us, data is being called the new oil in the sense that it is a natural resource which you can mine. I'll assert that there's a difference between data and natural resources. Natural resources, if anybody follows sustainability, are not quite renewable. Well, okay, they are, but they take hundreds of millions of years to renew. Data is kind of infinite. It's renewable, and you can keep mining it for profit, not just for its own sake. However, having an infrastructure that can deal with the data. We talked about zettabytes of data. The customers that I talk to, many of them have exabytes of data. So this is already straining their resources to the limit. So how do you deal with those, with the elastic amounts of infrastructure required for this ever-growing amount of data? How do you actually get insight from that much data in a reasonable amount of time? I would like fraud to be detected at the point at which fraud is occurring, not a day, a week, a month, or sometimes 6 months later. How do you then take that insight and provide it to somebody who's in the front line right at the point of delivery, not again at some later point. That's the goal of what big data is about. If you look at one of the examples that IBM has built, we built this machine called Watson. Some of you might remember that it won a game called Jeopardy on television 2 years ago. But it's not about game playing and about Jeopardy and quiz shows. It actually is about bringing the concept of cognitive computing, about trying to build a level of natural language understanding and dealing with it. A great example from the health sciences, from medicine. Oncology. 1.6 million people in the United States get diagnosed with cancer each year. In addition to that, about 200,000 people die due to medical errors, wrong prescriptions, wrong procedures, and so forth. Huge numbers. You now look at that and you say, how do you deal with all of that? Just look at oncology. There's 2 million pages a year of new research and protocols that are published. Do you really expect that your doctor might have read 2 million pages that year? So maybe there is a decision support system that can help the doctor, not replace the doctor, but help the doctor. I saw blood in the phlegm today. Maybe I should change the medicines and drugs I prescribe based on this new evidence. So really beginning to do evidence-based medicine, scanning all the literature, really providing in some sense a huge aid to the human doctor to go with that is what we are doing together with companies like WellPoint, as well as research institutions like Memorial Sloan Kettering. We are also helping WellPoint provide Watson as a service. Worry about how do you take all of the procedures, how do you take all of the protocols that could be followed upon an ailment, not just cancer, and provide a help to the nurse practitioners and the various people you might call up to say, I want to do this procedure, and up comes an aid to say, this helps, it doesn't help, here are the efficacies of these different procedures to help in making that decision, and then providing that back out to the community as a service. The numbers on this page were horrifying to me when I first saw it. Now, maybe this room is an exception, but maybe some of you have called a customer service center and not had such a pleasant experience. And I would hope that, when you call certainly somebody like your bank or your credit card company or an airline, they kind of know who you are and they can solve your problem. But more times than not, you get an agent who actually does not know what's happening to you. They don't know how to solve your problem. They'll kind of vaguely commit to get back to you, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and you kind of follow up, and sometimes you get frustrated and sometimes not. But if any of you have run customer service operations, I certainly run one today with a few thousand people, you kind of feel sorry for the people on the other side because they don't have all of the information in real time to actually help the person. They really do want to. So if you can have something that can help them, I'll take an example. So you see various names. You see some banks, some other companies. Nielsen is a consumer service company. So Nielsen helps, many of you might know it as a company that does television ratings. But they do more than that, right? Television ratings really help towards how much money are people willing to pay for ads that go out in both print media and broadcast media. Do you expect that 23-year-old media analyst in New York to have read the latest research from Australia that talks about that consumer packaged goods companies should place this kind of ad to get that kind of response? Maybe not. However, if you expect a machine can ingest and read all of the articles related to media buying, that seems feasible. And maybe when somebody questions them, maybe that media buyer can then get something that makes them appear a lot more smart, and as a consequence make their client a lot more happy and make the money they spent a lot more effective. So going into really customer service as opposed to just medicine is where we are next taking Watson. Maybe it can help you understand where you're uncovered in insurance and where you're overcovered in insurance. Maybe your auto and home and health all overlap massively in one spot and leave big vacant gaps in another one. So these are all areas where an understanding of natural language, all those contracts and fine print and your insurance policies that I'm sure all of you do read and never get surprised, but for those who don't, it can certainly be a huge help. So the last one I'm going to make, and I did say I was going to come back to sustainability. So the city of Malaga in Spain and IBM are working together on a sustainability project, in this case about energy conservation. So leveraging thousands of sensors, leveraging demand profiles in homes as well as businesses. The goal is to really deploy open source technologies. So right at the bottom, in this case, is Red Hat Linux combined with IBM mainframe. So yes, IBM mainframe does run Red Hat Linux, and actually thousands of customers run Red Hat Linux on the IBM mainframe. You combine that to collect all of the data from all of these sensors and all of the demand profiles, and the goal is clear. Provide feedback both to the end user as well as the utilities, in this case Endesa of Spain, to result in 20% less total energy consumption and 6,000 less tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from this one smaller city. And I would hazard a guess that most of you, Malaga is not the top city in Spain that even comes to your mind when you think about cities. So you think about that savings from one of these, and there are thousands of such places across the planet. The capability to now harness open source innovation combined with the digitization of the world that is happening with the data, combined again with the ecosystem of innovation on top of that data that's happening, or the big data world, allows us to really help preserve the planet and raise the quality of life. And by the way, along the way, make things a little bit cheaper for all of us. Because the utility company doesn't have to invest capital to build a new plant, it results in lower rates back for all of us. So good stories with innovation, with openness, with what we can do together, with creating an ecosystem where we all cooperate towards the greater good. So when you look at that, we're announcing the opening of new Power Systems Linux centers. We announced Beijing already on May the 14th. So this adds both New York and Austin, Texas. We're also announcing KVM support. We already support KVM on all of the x86 systems. KVM will now be added for Power Systems, and this will be available early next year. I always urge you all at these kinds of events to learn. Learn from each other, learn from the partners who are down in the various booths. So I will continue to do that by saying, learn about these technologies and learn about these innovations in the sessions from each other in the partner session. Explore the various booths that are out there, and join us on Thursday at the City Hall Plaza for the conference party. Thank you all for listening. You've been most patient.